guys, I'm Grace. Welcome back to 𝍊🍼🍊🍼 Studio. This week and for the next 4 weeks, we are going to be working on some new artworks based off of one of my very favorite things, which is rust. I can't wait to show you these. They're all going to be available for digital downloads in the description box below as we go, and I would love it if you guys liked and subscribed so you don't miss the whole series. So let's get started. Alright guys, so today we are going to be painting a color swatch study inspired by the warm, earthy tones of rust. This color holds a lot of importance to me, my business, my aesthetic, but we'll get into all that later. So rust is corrosion, and that forms when iron interacts with oxygen and water, but really mostly the oxygen in the water. Not the water specifically itself. It's a natural process and it's called oxidation. There are many different types of corrosion, like flaking, pitting. There's erosion corrosion, it's fun to say, and crevice corrosion, which is like in the seams of things. And while it's often seen as like a nuisance and it conjures images of decay and neglect in nature and in art, rust tells us a different story. It's a sign of transformation, a marker of that hand of time just reshaping the world. Seasons change, life cycles, and Mother Nature takes back. So before we can bust out the watercolors and mix up all those really beautiful warm tones, we need some subject matter. I had a lot of fun scouring the internet for my favorite examples of the different flora and fauna and Goblincore items to do for this study. I dripped some doodles on my iPad, and first what we're going to have to do is transfer that to some watercolor paper. I like to do it this way so that I can make sure all my little doodles are about the same size. This makes it just a lot easier for me to do the swatches and to make sure that everything is just beautifully lined up exactly how I want it. So we're going to start by transferring all of these little doodles over to my watercolor paper using a light pad. I really love line work. It's extremely satisfying and relaxing. So we're going to start with the maple leaf first. We're also going to be painting a 𝍊🍼🍊🍆 mushroom, the trusty rusty plant, a rusty key, some rusty screws, an oak leaf rolling weevil, a piece of jasper gemstone, a brown-lipped snail, an emperor moth, a rusty spigot, a chrysanthemum, a red-tail hawk feather, an amanita mushroom, a red rust flower beetle, some rusty buttons, a little devil frog, a rusty chain, a rusty black haw viburnum, a ranunculus flower, and a rusty tussock moth. One of my favorite things about rust is that I see a lot of history when I look at a piece that is covered in it, and it could just be, you know, it's a couple of weeks old and it's just been a really damp, rainy season, or that thing could be, you know, decades old. And especially for things like buttons, you know, whose shirt was that on? Was it somebody famous? Was it somebody important? Was it, you know, a really nice, expensive coat? What's the story behind it? Why is it lost? Why was it left there so long that it got rusty? Those are the things that I just find really interesting about rusty objects. You know, you always see like the old key. Where did the key go? What kind of door did it open? Was it a treasure box? Was it somebody's home? Was it, you know, and obviously you can look at some of those objects and decide a lot of that just by looking at it, but you don't really know. And I think that's some of the joy in finding the little rusty things. Alright, now it's time to remove the tape. We're going to get into some details here on these doodles. I want to make sure that each one has lots of love and as much interesting line work as possible, because I think that's what really makes these color swatches. The colors obviously are the more prominent part, but without a good doodle, you know, just some paint on some paper. The Amanita mushroom is almost always my favorite. You'll see it all over my channel. I mean, let's be honest. You'll see all of these all over my channel. I love beetles, and that's the whole point in Goblincore. Those lesser loved critters. Alright, now on to some color mixing. One of the reasons I really wanted to do this entire series, besides just loving rust, is that I find it very interesting how it plays out in art specifically. It comes in all kinds of colors, and it's usually dependent upon what item it's actually on, like what object it is being rusty on. So, you know, paints chip and metal breaks away, and depending on the color of those things, sometimes that can change the color of rust. You can get really bright yellows and blues and greens, but today we're really going to be focusing on the warm, more orange leaning brown into red tones, because they're an important part of my brand and my aesthetic. I really love those warm tones. I feel cozy. Painting them is just, it's earthy and it's more enjoyable for me. Speaking of them being earthy, that, you can find all of these naturally in clay and rocks and other minerals. Iron oxide, which is just rust, is the mineral that is used to give ochres their distinctive colors. So like yellow ochre, red ochre, and brown ochres, a lot of the common options in paint palettes, like the one I have here by Holbein, has a lot of those colors. And I would imagine if we did the research and looked back, these are probably going to be some of the very first true pigment colors we had, to paint things like pottery and glazes and maybe even those ancient cave paintings. But even if you aren't looking to paint with them, and even without man-made objects, you can find rusty tones everywhere in nature. Autumn leaves, desert landscapes, those beautiful warm sunrises and sunsets, all different kinds of flowers, trees, and especially in the fall, when everything is starting to kind of die back from your greens. So rust is very important to me. When coming up with the name and the vibe I wanted for this business, it was really important for me to convey multiple messages with not just the name, but the eventual logo and all of that kind of stuff. I wanted rust both as the color and the name to be a part of it. In my head, especially for Goblincore, I just imagine like this old rusty garden leading into the most magical overgrown forest or grove, and just something that looked as magical as the stuff that I wanted to bring to light for everybody. I don't want those slightly forgotten things to be forgotten, though that is some of the charm of them, which I find ironic and also interesting. But the orangey brown tones of rust and the combination of it with green, you've got that complementary color wheel action going, but also orange is like fiery and energetic and dynamic, and green is really calm and soothing, and they balance each other out really well. And there's like a tension between them, kind of like a decay and renewal, a chaos and an order, but also like, the transition between summer into fall, which is my favorite time of year. And I just feel like in Goblincore there's so much beauty in that imperfect, overlooked, undervalued, and forgotten aspect of things changing and time changing. And I just think that it's a beautiful process, a collaboration between elements nature reclaiming, transforming, once static things into something organic and beautiful. And so that's it. This is my ode to rust and why it's important to me and why I love it. I hope you guys hang around for this series, and make sure you download this little piece of artwork from my website in the description box below.